LEIGHTDICKEY.com. Do you have an event or occasion coming up that could use a special touch? Perhaps a wedding, a production, a show? Good! Then you're in luck. Hayley Moores is who you're looking for. Hayley is a makeup artist in the Toronto, Ontario area, specializing in bridal, glam, natural, and special effects. She's incredibly talented, professional, easy to work with, and has a personality that is second to none. To book Hayley Moores today, follow her on Instagram at mad_milash, that's MAD_MILASH, or email her at madmilash, again, that's MADMILASH @gmail.com. Book Hayley Moores today, you'll be glad you did. LEIGHTDICKEY.com. LEIGHTDICKEY.com. Do you find yourself reminiscing on what life was like when you were younger? Do your favorite songs, movies, and TV shows instantly take you back to a simpler time? Great! Then you're in the right place. Join me, Leigh Dickey, on my new web series and podcast, Yo Nostalgia, where I cover everything you grew up with. From films and toys to fads and trends, Yo Nostalgia has it all. Subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever podcasts are available. Follow along on social media at Yo Nostalgia Show to keep up on this time-traveling trip. Yo Nostalgia, breathing new life into your memories, available everywhere now. LEIGHTDICKEY.com. LEIGHTDICKEY.com. Do you enjoy good conversation? Are you a person with many passions? Perfect. Then the Beats and Speaks podcast is for you. Join me, Leigh Dickey, every Friday for stories and interviews about everyday life with everyday people about everyday things. Everyone has a story, and I just want to help them tell it. The Beats and Speaks podcast, your everyday life, everyday stories, everyday people, comedy and entertainment audio joyride. Subscribe and download on LEIGHTDICKEY.com, Leigh Dickey TV on YouTube, and your favorite podcast app. The Beats and Speaks podcast, available everywhere now. LEIGHTDICKEY.com. LEIGHTDICKEY.com. Hey, what's going on, everybody? Leigh Dickey here. Welcome to a brand new episode of the Beats and Speaks podcast. Today, this week, I want to tell you why I think movies need to be shorter. And I'll tell you why in just a second, right after I tell you where you can find the Beats and Speaks podcast. Of course, new episodes of the Beats and Speaks podcast are released every single Friday on my official website, LEIGHTDICKEY.com, iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, and wherever podcasts are available. Please do comment, like, share, and subscribe. Find us on YouTube as well under Leigh Dickey TV. Please do leave us a 5-star rating and a review if you would, please, and thank you very much. If you want to follow along with me or the show, at Leigh T. Dickey on social media. Send your comments, questions, episode ideas, guest requests, and everything else to LeighTDickey@gmail.com to get in touch with me and the Beats and Speaks podcast. But now that all that housekeeping is out of the way, let's get to the main event. Let's get to why you are really here, and that is why I think movies need to be shorter right here on a brand new episode of the Beats and Speaks podcast. Alright, so yes, movies need to be shorter, and why is that? Well, I'm going to tell you why. Movies need to be shorter because they're just, I don't know, I find that nowadays they're way too long with these cinematic universes and Marvel and DC, which is another episode that will take place sometime in the future, right here on the Beats and Speaks podcast. I'll give you my opinion on both sets of universe or comic book universe films, but I think movies need to be shorter, because when you get anywhere north of 2 hours, it's just like, do we need that? Like, people start losing interest. People start sort of fidgeting and wanting to leave. And what happened to, I remember coming up as a kid, when I was growing up, movies were routinely somewhere in the neighborhood of 80 to 90 minutes. I think very few were north of 100, maybe 105 minutes. So, like, the perfect movie length, in my opinion, is 90 minutes, okay, or slightly more than that, 90 to 100 minutes. I'm good with that type of a length when it comes to a movie. I want a 90 to 100 minute film. That's perfect. If it's 80 minutes, I can live with that too. But 90 to 100 minutes is a fantastic film. Like, look at, even though I haven't seen any of these films in a long, long time, the Halloween franchise or Jason. Those films are about right around an hour and a half. Like, that is the perfect length for a film. When you get into these giant blockbuster cinematic masterpiece things, if you want to call them that, and they're north of 2 hours, it becomes a chore. For me, it becomes a chore. Okay, and I'm sure for a lot of people, when they're 2.5 hours, that can become a chore. Like, I saw Venom, the first one with Tom Hardy, back when it came out, and I have it because I actually do really enjoy that film. And it's about 95 minutes or so. It's not even that long. It's right at, I think, an hour and 35 minutes or an hour 40, something like that. It was short because I remember thinking to myself cause I did see it in theater. I remember thinking to myself that film, it seemed to go by really quickly. It seemed short, and it is. I think it's right about an hour and a half, maybe an hour 40, okay, at most. I don't think it's all that long because it's not 2 hours, right? But when you get into these larger budget films that need to incorporate so much and they get north of 2 hours, it's like I'm losing interest, okay? Once you get to 2.5 hours, I lose interest. Don't get me wrong. My favorite film is The Blues Brothers from 1980 with Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi. That is my favorite film of all time, and it's north of 2 hours. It's about 2:20, I think, 2:15, 2:20, maybe even around 2.5. That's the only 2.5 hour film I'll sit through because I've seen it so many times that I can still get enjoyment out of it. I can still be entertained by it because I know the ins and outs of that film. I've legitimately got like 5 or 6 copies of the original film, and I have a copy of the sequel, which is about 2 hours and 5 minutes, 2 hours 4 minutes, 2 hours 5 minutes, somewhere in there. Those are the only 2 hour films that I can sit through comfortably and still be entertained by. Films these days, I can't be entertained by. When you're north of 2 hours, and I'm not a big movie guy these days anyhow, but when you get north of 2 hours, I'm wanting to leave. I legitimately start fidgeting in my chair, and it's no longer entertaining to me. I'm struggling to A, stay awake, B, follow the story, C, find some sort of enjoyment and entertainment in whatever film I'm trying to watch. It's just not something that I would want to put myself through constantly. I've seen several films in the last couple of years, and it's just like, why do they have to be so long? I don't get it. Can you not cram like these super long cinematic masterpieces that you craft into a shorter format? Can you not get something? I don't know whether you need all that extra, like, oh, look at that Easter egg there, or, oh, that's cool that they did that. If it adds to the film, but you can take that, if whatever you add to the film doesn't take away from the story, and then you can remove whatever you added, and it still flows like a cohesive piece of entertainment, then why add it? I'm a firm believer in that less is more. If you can entertain me in a short time span, keep my attention, I'm going to enjoy that more than, going to see some 2.5 hour, cinematic explosion type comic book film. It's just not something I need movies to be shorter, okay? And that's particularly why I prefer to watch documentaries and sort of like docu-series type television shows, because very rarely are they 2 hours. They are 90 minutes or less. Sometimes they may even be less than an hour, okay? Either way, I prefer that stuff because it keeps me entertained. It keeps me hooked. There's something in there that I'm invested in and that I want to find out, that I want to learn. When I go to a movie like that's been released in theaters and I'm sitting there for north of 2 hours, going on 2.5, sometimes probably even pushing 3, I don't want to do that anymore, because 3 hours is a long time. I mean, I took my mom and a family friend to see Lord of the Rings: The Return of the King when it came out. I think I was about 17 or so. But Lord of the Rings is not my thing. Okay, it's really not. It's not something that I enjoy. I never got into the films. I've never read the books. But any sort of film that's in that genre, like the sort of medieval or like going to war type back in like back in those days, it's not something that I would enjoy. And it was 3.5 hours. And to be quite honest with you, I struggled to stay awake because I'm not invested in the subject material, but I went because my mom really loves this stuff and she really wanted to go. What am I gonna? I'm not gonna deny her. Like if she wants to go see it, let's go see it. You know what I mean? Like if mom says I want to go see this, yeah, I'm gonna do whatever I can to make that happen. If you want to go see it, we'll go see it. Now I don't have to like the film, but I love my mother, and I will sit through a 3.5 hour film if she enjoys it. Okay? And it's the same thing with anybody. If somebody says, hey, let's go to a movie, and even if I don't really like the subject matter, doesn't matter how long it is, if whoever I go with is getting enjoyment out of it, then I'm happy. All right? But for myself, I don't want to sit through like a 2 hour plus film anymore. As I said, The Blues Brothers and its sequel are two of my favorite films. The original film is my favorite film of all time, and it's north of 2 hours. It's probably even closer to 2.5. I'll sit through that because I've seen it so many times. It's my earliest film memory. Don't ask me as a kid why I was watching something like The Blues Brothers. I couldn't tell you, but I fell in love with that film, and I can sit and watch it over and over again and still get the same amount of enjoyment that I did back when I was a kid now. I can do that with the sequel as well, even though it's not the greatest film. I know that, but I still love it. Okay, they're both north of 2 hours. I enjoy those films just because. These days, all I see are like, this is a big giant Hollywood blockbuster that's got hundreds of millions of dollars pumped into it. What does that mean? It's probably north of 2 hours. Probably even pushing 2.5. Maybe even closer to 3. Who knows? Do I want to sit through that? Like, normally, I'm all for like something where a movie's got giant special effects and explosions. Now it just seems that like every movie is doing the same thing, and they're all about the same length, and they're all trying to tell the same story because they're all like interwoven with each other. And I'm getting ahead of myself because that'll be another episode on the Beats and Speaks podcast in the future. But my main point is movies are too long, and if you get north of 2 hours, for the most part, I lose interest. Therefore, it's not holding my attention. Therefore, why did I spend the money to come here? Therefore, why did I spend the money to actually buy the film? Or why am I investing the time to try and enjoy something that I'm clearly like losing interest in, or that I'm clearly like running away from in terms of like visually and just looking. I find myself sometimes looking around a theater that I'm in, sitting trying to watch a movie, trying to notice all the fact that I don't enjoy the film, but I'm looking at something to keep my attention that isn't on the screen because I'm not interested anymore. It's north of 2 hours. I want to go home. I want to get out of here. It's not something that I know that I'm going to enjoy if it starts getting way too long. And if you can cut the fat, if you can trim the fat from the movie, trim the fat. Like if it doesn't affect the story, you don't need it in the film. That's my opinion. But there it is. Why I think movies need to be shorter. I just think that there's too much, and you're building these like epic cinematic films. They don't need to be so epic. Just because it's got like a superhero in it, or just because it's the next big comic book thing, or it's the next big thing you think in terms of cinematic technology, or like the next thing in a cinematic universe, it doesn't need to be north of 2 hours. You can squeeze that into 90 minutes or less. And if you can't, then you really should think about why you're a filmmaker. I mean, I understand the money involved, but if you need to add to the story to in a way make it more entertaining, let's say, or you think, oh, that'll be a nice Easter egg, or certain people will notice that. The only thing I notice is that once you get north of 2 hours, I lose interest and try to stay awake. I struggle. There were certain films that I've seen in the last couple of years, and I'm just like, why is this so long? Like, how much longer am I gonna have to sit here? It's just, you can trim the fat. If you can trim the fat and tell the same story, trim the fat. That's all I'm saying. You don't need as much in there. Like sometimes like the other thing that gets me is you'll sit through a movie and then they'll have like a scene in the end credits and it's just like, stop it. Okay, let's go through the credits, fade to black, done. Like, why would you? No, no, no. I don't need an Easter egg with an end credits scene. I just no, 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 no. That's cool. It doesn't matter to me. Okay, just credits, fade to black, done. Movies need to be shorter because people, honestly, I'm sure that I'm not the only one that thinks this. And if I'm not, great. If I am, oh well. But movies are perfect at like 90 minutes or less, 100 minutes at most. Okay? They don't need to be these super long 2.5 to 3 hour marathons. Like, I sat through Grindhouse because I think it came out when I was about 17 or 18. I sat through that. It's a double feature. It ran nearly, I think it was about 4.5 hours, maybe about, in that ballpark. But that's 2 films. I sat through that. I don't want to do that with a single film. Okay, and I did that with 2 films. It seems that like everybody's going for more is more. And ladies and gentlemen, I come from the school of thought, and I'm here to tell you that when it comes to everything, not just films, less is more. If you can get the same effect with, say, 30 minutes less of material or 15 minutes less of material, go that route. If you can tell the same story, if it doesn't affect the story, and you're not adding too much and just going way too over the top, cool. Go the subtle route. Go the less is more route. It's fine. For a guy like me, that's great. If I can sit through like a 90-minute film, I'm cool. I can sit through a 90-minute film. I can be entertained, but once you get north of the 120-minute mark, you've lost me for the most part. You know what I mean? Like, for the most part, you get north of 120 minutes, I'm lost. Okay, and I'm sure a lot of people feel that way. These things don't need to be as long and drawn out, and they don't have to be so explosion happy as they are. That's just my opinion on why movies need to be shorter and why they should be shorter. But thank you all again for listening to this week's episode of the Beats and Speaks podcast. I have been your host, Leigh Dickey, and I am signing off. We'll see you all and talk to you all next Friday for a brand new episode of the Beats and Speaks podcast. Please do find us on your favorite podcast app and player of choice, as well as my official website, LEIGHTDICKEY.com. We're on YouTube as well under Leigh Dickey TV, so please do comment, like, share, and subscribe there as well. Rate us 5 stars and leave us reviews on your favorite podcast app and player of choice. If you want to follow along on social media, you can do that, please, and thank you at Leigh T. Dickey. Send your comments, questions, guest requests, and episode ideas to LeighTDickey@gmail.com. Thank you all again for listening. I've been Leigh Dickey. This has been another episode of the Beats and Speaks podcast, and I am signing off. We will see you all and talk to you all next Friday for a brand new episode of the Beats and Speaks podcast. All right, I've been Leigh Dickey, and I am signing off. Talk to you later. Have a great one. Peace. LeighTDickey.com